Let's talk all about it with independent journalist Ayanda Sishi Wigzell joining us now. Good evening to you and welcome. A lot to get through today, and I think given Joe Biden's address just now at COP27, we're going to focus a lot on how the conversation was shaped with regard to all of these super planes and private jets arriving in Sharm el-Sheikh for a climate change conference. But let's kick off with Julius Malema and the reasons he's been trending and the party's been trending this week. But first, let's take a listen to this.
You must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act.
Well, I
just hand it to you.
Good evening to you, Iman, and good evening to all the SABC viewers. What we just saw right now was a clip of Julius Malema in response to the protests that were happening in Brackenfell last year, I believe. And what happened in Brackenfell is that one of the EFF members was assaulted. And in response to that, Julius Malema said what we just heard right now in the speech. He was reported to the Human Rights Commission, and since then the Human Rights Commission, the South African Human Rights Commission rather, has come out and said that he needs to apologize within 10 days, otherwise he'll be taken to the Equality Court. Social media was split on this because half of social media was saying that Julius Malema seems to be a target for the Equality Court and for the Human Rights Commission, whereas other people were saying that the contents of his speech was inciting violence. So there was a little bit of a divide that was happening there on social media, but the EFF did respond and said that Julius Malema's comments were taken out of context, but people seem to think that whatever comes out of his mouth is golden and it's gospel because he's a politician, and this is what the Human Rights Commission was alluding to.
And it has a lot of influence.
Yes, it has a lot of influence and it has a lot of weight in society because he has a responsibility to make sure that people are protected and he does not incite violence. So in the opinion of the Human Rights Commission, this is what he has done. And the EFF has now responded in saying that they will meet the South African Human Rights Commission in the Equality Court because they do not intend on apologizing in the statement that they had released right now. And this is why Julius Malema was trending for the past couple of days on social media.
Yeah, I mean, you know what would be so interesting also is to look at the, the profile a little more closely of who basically kind of, as you say, kind of feeds into or is influenced by the influence that he has in dividing, social opinion on such a contentious matter.
Yes, of course. And people were speaking about the fact that he is a Pan-Africanist, but he was missing from Parliament, from Pan-African Parliament this week due to the many commitments that he had. And so social media was also asking, where is he in light of all of this that was happening? Of course, the tweets were coming from mainly in Johannesburg, in the Johannesburg region, because of course this was happening here in our province, and he was answering these questions in our province as well. So the trends were mainly focused here on the Gauteng province, but the profile of people who were, especially on Facebook, who were supporting him, it mainly came from the supporters of the economic freedom fighters on Facebook. But on Twitter, there was a little bit more of a divide that was happening, and people that were questioning why is it that he was being targeted by the Human Rights Commission. But there was another half that was saying that he should not be inciting violence.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I like that you bring in, Facebook, because we know that there are particular audiences that go to certain social media channels who might be, let's say, older, one can argue about more mature on Facebook, but a different demographic split, sort of age split between those two audiences.
Yes.
Let's come to ANC Youth League NTT.
Yes, the ANC Youth League was trending this week. The Young Lions did not nominate anybody young, which then led people on social media questioning, are they young lions or have they been relegated to domesticated cats? And these are the questions that we are asking right now, because they failed to provide a platform for a young person to actually become the president of the country. So they nominated Zweli Mkhize, who is 68 years old, and they also nominated, I believe they nominated Paul Mashatile, yes.
Yeah.
The Women's League as well also did not come to the fore when they nominated Cyril Ramaphosa as the president. And then in tradition, with women deputizing in the ANC, they nominated Thandi Modise to be the deputy. Yet they say that they want to elevate women and they want to bring in more women into the leadership. These structures are really, really uniting social media, actually. And the fact that social media is tired the users are tired. They want to see themselves represented. So the questions that were coming out of social media were whether or not we're actually going to vote for the African National Congress if you don't see ourselves represented, especially on Twitter. On Facebook, the discussions that we had were more localized because these were members of the African National Congress who were asking, why is it that we are not seeing our young compatriots in the top 6 leadership? Whereas on Twitter, people were questioning, why is it that the ANC Women's League has failed to nominate a woman this time, yet in the previous conference, this is exactly what they did. They ran on the ticket of bringing women into the top 6, into power. And they say that this is what they are doing, but we are not seeing that being performed right now. What we are seeing is that these structures are actually sticking towards the lines of power in order to gain, in order for them to actually still be around and exist. And, you know, there's an importance with that acronym NTT, because that stands for National Task Team, which means that these structures are actually not proper structures. They're not proper bodies that exist within the African National Congress because they've been relegated to task teams, which means that their power is really, really insignificant at this point in time. So how will they be representative of majority young people and women in South Africa?
And then there was Ekurhuleni, and of course Zweli Mkhize, you know, also in the mix there.
Absolute confusion that was coming out of the African National Congress. So Tania Campbell has been reinstated as the mayor of Ekurhuleni, and social media users were actually happy to hear that Ekurhuleni finally has leadership, because we know that the problems that exist in Ekurhuleni, if there is no leadership, you know, there's no service delivery, the bins are not being taken, and the city was starting to become dirty. And people were actually pointing this out in the 1.5, I think, 2 weeks that Tania Campbell was actually not in leadership. So they're very excited to know that there was a mayor, regardless of who it was that won. But what happened with the African National Congress is that the regional leader of Ekurhuleni, Zweli Mkhize, did not follow party instructions, and he brought the African National Congress into disrepute. And this is what people were also talking about on social media, was that this party politics that is playing here and the political grabbing of power actually does not benefit people. It benefits those in the African National Congress. And we saw that people were really, really questioning what were the motives of Zweli Mkhize when he went out and did not follow party instructions by withdrawing the motion of no confidence against Tania Campbell, and what happened with the negotiations that were going on between the African National Congress and the EFF. People would like to know what actually went down in that meeting properly, so that we know the reasons why that Zweli Mkhize is removed.
Quite a cracker of a week. And then let's travel in our non-carbon emitting plane, our thought plane, 5,900 kilometers away from Johannesburg to Sharm el-Sheikh, and find out what the actual with COP27 and how those discussions are going down. I remember seeing, you know, one unfortunate campaigner saying, I'm in the plane and half the plane is activists, you know, we're headed to climate change conference and we're going to be doing, of course, there's a lot of debate about how many kilograms of, you know, carbon emissions, etc., actually in the air, and whether, you know, this is more important that people are there to do good work. But talk us through how the conversations went.
So the tweet that you are referring to, there was a viral tweet that actually shows the traffic, the air traffic that was going on around Egypt, and there were so many private planes that were landing in Egypt. And this is what activists were talking about. Why so many private planes at a climate summit, especially one that has been happening for 27 years? There are activists who are from South Africa who are making a lot of noise, and they're actually the darlings of COP27. They challenged the United States and they challenged Joe Biden in saying that Africa needs to be paid a reparation for climate damage that has happened on our continent. As we speak right now, there are floods that are happening in KZN right now. There is droughts that is continuing to happen in some parts of Southern Africa. This is all due to climate change. And we know that South Africa is the biggest emitter of climate damage here on the African continent, and I believe we are 14th in the world. And so there is a need for us to be there. But people are also questioning, when is it going to be time for these big Western countries to start paying for reparational damage that they have done on this continent? What is also interesting is that Cyril Ramaphosa, who is also the darling of COP27, received a loan for just energy transition here in this country. And people were questioning, why is it that we're taking on more foreign debt debt, if it is that if the country says that they cannot afford to increase our grants, and with the midterm budget speech that came from the Minister Enoch Godongwana, he did not paint a very good picture about our financial status right now as a country, yet we are still borrowing money from Bretton Woods institutions, and we are still borrowing money from the World Bank. And how is this going to help the ordinary South Africans who are on the ground, who are still suffering from flooding? As we've seen in KZN, there are some flood victims who have not received any kind of help that they need. So people are questioning, why have there been 27 COPs, and what has been happening in this 27 COP that will be different from the 26 others that have previously happened?
Ayanda Sishi Wigzell, well done. Excellently delivered this week. Thank you so much. It's always fun chatting with you, but also to kind of do a bit of a deep dive into how those conversations are going, and that's the kind of chatter that really defines our national conversation in many ways. So thank you very much, and see you again next week.